Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. The Philosopher's Stone.
The Philosophers Stone.
We'll be looking at excerpts from Israel Regardie's book, actually called The Philosopher's Stone.
Mm.
And, when you hear Philosopher's Stone, what comes to mind?
It's turning lead into gold.
Right. Like the whole idea of alchemy.
Yeah.
But what we're going to uncover today is that these alchemists were really onto something much deeper, something that's still so relevant to us today, especially when it comes to like personal growth and even psychology.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how those two, how alchemy and psychotherapy actually like really intertwine. They have similar goals
Oh, interesting.
in terms of creating like a whole and integrated person.
So let's break that down a bit. Regardie talks about fear being a big roadblock on that journey to wholeness. He says that fear and anxiety can actually cause what he calls a shrinkage of consciousness. Have you ever felt that way? Like, fear was just holding you back from doing something or trying something new. I know I have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like you get stuck. It's like this rigidity.
Yeah.
You can't kind of break free from certain patterns, and it keeps you limited, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what psychotherapy aims to help you do. It's to sort of break free from those automatic behaviors, those unhealthy behaviors.
Like the compulsions.
The compulsions
Yeah.
that keep you stuck.
And you're saying that the alchemists were trying to do the same thing.
Yeah. They were trying to free individuals from those compulsions, that kept them in this sort of like limited state of being.
Interesting. So it's really about recognizing those patterns and finding ways to break free from them. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, okay, let's talk about this Philosopher's Stone. I mean, everyone always assumes it's about turning lead into gold.
Right.
Like literally.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that's not really what it's about.
It's more metaphorical.
Okay.
It's like an analogy, right?
Yeah.
The Philosopher's Stone is actually this symbol of wholeness. It represents like a purified, integrated psyche.
Okay, so more about inner transformation.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did the alchemists go about achieving this?
Well, there were a lot of
Regardie talks about these principles like salt, sulfur, and mercury.
yes.
And he says like salt is like the base matter,
Right.
Sulfur is this fiery, active principle.
Yeah.
And then mercury is this fluid, adaptable consciousness. It sounds kind of complicated.
It is. It's a lot to take in, but I think there's a simple way to think about it.
Okay.
So like salt, that's like your raw material, right?
Like your personality, your basic building blocks.
Got it. Okay.
And sulfur is your passion, your drive, your desire, right? The things that make you tick.
Okay.
And then mercury is how you sort of adapt, how you interact with the world.
So it's really like different facets of yourself.
Yeah, different aspects of the self.
And they thought by understanding all these and integrating them, you could achieve that wholeness.
Yeah.
Okay, and this brings us to another interesting connection between alchemy and psychology.
Yeah.
Which is this whole concept of the unconscious.
Yes.
And Regardie, he compares the unconscious mind to a vast sea.
Right.
And it contains both positive and negative aspects. I always found that to be such a powerful image.
It is. It's an interesting analogy, right? Because it helps us to understand that consciousness actually emerges from the unconscious. It's not the other way around.
Wow. So it's like this hidden world within us that's shaping our conscious experience.
Yeah, it's shaping everything. It's shaping our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior.
Okay, so Regardie, he gets even more intriguing, I think, when he starts talking about this idea of a deliberate disintegration of consciousness.
Yeah.
And he says that's a necessary step in the alchemical process. So we're talking like mental breakdown here. What's going on?
Not exactly. It's not about destroying the self, but about kind of confronting and integrating our shadow aspects.
Oh.
The parts of ourselves that we tend to hide or deny, often out of fear or shame.
Right.
But they're there.
Okay, so it's about facing those hidden parts.
Yeah.
Even the ones that we don't really like.
Yeah, you got to face them head on.
Okay. Have you ever had like an experience where something really difficult happened and it kind of felt like your whole world was falling apart?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But then looking back, you realized it was actually leading to something better.
It always does.
Yeah.
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 Like a new chapter in your life. It's like a death and rebirth, right?
So this disintegration that Regardie talks about, it's kind of like that, like a necessary step.
Yeah, a necessary step for growth.
Okay.
You break down those old structures, the rigid structures within yourself.
So that something new can emerge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Wow. Okay. So I love this concept that it's not about avoiding those difficult parts of ourselves, but like leaning into them, integrating them.
Yeah. You got to make friends with the shadow.
Yeah. And the alchemists really believed that was a key to unlocking like a whole new level of wisdom and power.
They did. They believed that the shadow held great potential.
So, I mean, this is incredible.
It is. And we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, I know. We're just getting started. We've got a lot more to uncover.
Yeah, we've got to talk about like the actual techniques and practices they use
to bring about this transformation. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. All right, so we're back. And I'm really curious to dig into the practical side of things here. How did these alchemists actually put these principles into practice? Like, what were some of the things that they actually did to try to bring about this inner transformation?
Well, one of the core ideas in alchemy is this idea of separating and purifying the elements.
Okay.
Remember those alchemical principles, salt, sulfur, and mercury?
Yeah.
Well, they believed that these elements were present in all matter,
Mm-hmm.
but in varying degrees of purity.
Okay, so like taking something that was raw and unrefined and making it pure.
Exactly. Yeah, refining it.
So they were doing that both like physically in their labs, but also symbolically, like within themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, they believed that that by working with physical substances, they could actually mirror and even like catalyze changes within their own like souls.
So they weren't just like messing around with beakers and potions. They were actually using that external process to try to create an internal shift.
Yeah, it was a very symbolic process.
That's fascinating. So what were some of the specific techniques that they used?
Well, one that Regardie talks about is called calcination.
Calcination. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating. What is that?
It sounds pretty intense, I know.
Yeah.
But it's not about like literal burning.
Okay.
It's about inner purification.
Okay. So what would that actually look like in practice? Like if I was an alchemist trying to calcine myself, what would I be doing?
Well, imagine like confronting your deepest fears, your insecurities,
Yeah.
bringing them into the light of consciousness. That's the essence of calcination.
So it's about like intentionally facing those things that we usually try to avoid.
Exactly.
Shine a light on them and be like, okay, there you are.
Yep. Acknowledge them. Don't pretend they don't exist.
Okay. I mean, that sounds challenging, but I can see how it would be like an important part of this process.
It's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
But the alchemists believed that it was essential for real transformation.
So we've got calcination. What's the next step?
Well, Regardie also talks about dissolution.
Dissolution. Okay.
And in this stage, the elements are basically dissolved in a special solvent called the Philosopher's Mercury.
Philosopher's Mercury. Okay, now we're getting really mysterious here. What is that?
Well, remember how we were talking about mercury as representing that fluid, adaptable consciousness?
Yeah.
Well, the Philosopher's Mercury is kind of like that, but purified. It's like a more awakened consciousness, capable of dissolving those impurities and limitations of the ordinary self.
So it's like a universal solvent, but for our minds.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And this dissolution, it's not like annihilation. It's more like a transformation.
Right. It's about transforming those rigid structures of the self.
So you can create something new.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've separated and purified the elements.
Right.
We've calcined them, dissolved them. What happens next?
Well, then comes coagulation.
Coagulation, okay.
And this is where the dissolved elements are basically brought back together, but in a new, more harmonious form.
So it's not just about putting the pieces back together as they were before.
No, it's about creating something new.
Okay.
A more integrated version of yourself.
Okay, so like taking a machine apart, cleaning each part, putting it back together.
Yeah, a perfect analogy.
But in this case, it's our own mind and spirit.
Exactly.
And they really believed that by going through this whole process, you could create this more refined, integrated self.
They did. And they also believed that the imagination played a really important role in this whole process.
Oh, interesting. So like using imagery and symbols to guide their work?
Yeah, both internally and externally.
Okay, and I know we talked about this a little bit before, but like what's the significance of those symbols, like the crow, the dragon, the lion?
Right. Well, those symbols, they represent different aspects of the psyche.
Hmm.
So, for example, the crow, that often symbolizes the shadow self.
Okay.
The dragon, that can represent those untamed forces of the unconscious.
Yeah.
The lion that symbolizes strength, courage, and that potential for transformation.
So they were using these symbols to kind of help them to navigate this complex landscape of the psyche.
Exactly, like a map, right?
Yeah.
To explore the uncharted territory of the inner world.
So this is all really fascinating, but I have to admit it's also a little bit overwhelming. I mean, where do we even begin to like apply these principles in our own lives? Do I need to go like build a lab and start mixing potions?
You don't need a lab. You can start by paying attention to the symbolism in your own dreams.
Okay.
Our dreams are often full of alchemical imagery.
So like use our dreams as a guide to our own inner alchemy.
Exactly. Pay attention to those symbols.
Oh.
They're trying to tell you something.
Now that you mention it, I had a dream last night about a phoenix rising from the ashes. I wonder what that could mean.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful symbol of rebirth and renewal. It suggests that maybe you're going through a period of transformation.
Like that calcination process.
Exactly, where those old patterns and beliefs are being burned away.
Wow. It's like I'm starting to see the world in a whole new way, like through this lens of symbolism and hidden meaning.
That's the beauty of alchemy.
Yeah.
It invites us to see the world as a living organism, full of hidden connections.
Okay, so what are some other ways that we can kind of apply these principles in our daily lives, besides analyzing our dreams, of course?
Well, you can start by cultivating a sense of mindfulness.
Okay.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
The alchemists, they believed that self-knowledge was the key to transformation.
So it's not just about reading books and understanding the theory, but actually doing the work.
Yeah, you got to do the work.
Yeah.
Engage in that inner work. And they weren't afraid to confront their own shadows,
Yeah.
their own weaknesses.
It's like that quote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
And it highlights another important aspect of alchemy, and that's the role of relationships.
Okay.
The alchemists, they believed that we're all interconnected, and our relationships can really be catalysts for our own transformation.
So it's not just about working on ourselves in isolation, it's about engaging with the world and with other people.
Exactly. They saw the world as this vast alchemical laboratory.
Wow. Like we're all part of this grand experiment.
They are.
Whether we realize it or not.
Right. And the more conscious we become of that, the more we can participate in our own transformation and the transformation of the world around us.
So it's not just about personal growth, but also about like contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
That's a really inspiring thought.
It is. It is. And it leads us to the ultimate question. What is the Philosopher's Stone?
Yeah.
And what does it actually mean to achieve this legendary state of being?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And I guess that's what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
That's right. We're going to unlock the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone.
All right. So we're back and ready to tackle the big one, the Philosopher's Stone. We've talked about the process, the symbols, all this psychology, but what does it all mean? Like, what is it? Really?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The one that's captivated alchemists for, well, centuries, really. And I think as we've been discussing, it's not just as simple as, cooking up some magical potion in the lab.
Right. It's not about finding some literal thing, right?
Right.
We've been talking about this Philosopher's Stone as more of a metaphor for, like, achieving wholeness,
Yeah.
integrating all these different parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
But, part of me still wonders, was there something real, something tangible that the alchemists were after?
It's an interesting question. I think it really gets to the heart of what alchemy is all about. The Philosopher's Stone, it's the culmination of this whole process, right?
Yeah.
It's that point where you've successfully integrated all these aspects of yourself. You've brought them together into a harmonious whole. It's like reaching this state of wholeness, of enlightenment,
So it's more of a state of being, transformed consciousness.
Exactly. It's about reaching this level of consciousness where you're not bound by those limitations anymore, the fears, the ego-driven desires. It's about accessing that divine spark within yourself.
Wow. Yeah.
That potential for wisdom and compassion and creativity that we all have.
It's like the Philosopher's Stone represents the full realization of our potential as humans.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think even though the alchemists, they used a lot of, complicated language and imagery,
Right.
I think their goal was to help us understand and access that potential within ourselves.
I can't help but think back to that idea that Regardie brought up. He mentioned that this Philosopher's Stone, it might actually grant the ability to physically transmute metals.
Yeah.
I mean, do we take that literally? Is that even possible?
It's definitely one of the more debated aspects of alchemy, right? And
Yeah.
while some people, they do take that literally, they believe in this idea of transmuting lead into gold. I think it's more helpful to see that as a metaphor.
A metaphor for what, exactly?
Think about it as a metaphor for the power of a transformed psyche. If we can achieve that level of inner alchemy, who knows what's possible out in the world, right?
So you're saying, like, that transformation within ourselves could actually have a ripple effect outwards?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just about personal growth. It's about, potentially transforming our relationships, our communities, maybe even the world.
So the Philosopher's Stone, it's not just about individual enlightenment.
Right.
It's like a collective awakening. We realize that our own inner transformation is connected to the transformation of everything around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it, yeah. And I think that captures the real essence of what these alchemists were trying to convey.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much, the history, the psychology, all these symbols and techniques. But ultimately, I think what we've really uncovered is this profound potential that we all have within us.
We do.
What would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners? What do you want them to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that this Philosopher's Stone, it's not something outside of you. It's not something you have to go searching for in some, far off land.
Yeah.
It exists within each of us. It's that potential for wholeness, that potential for enlightenment. And even though the alchemists spoke about it in these, cryptic and kind of confusing terms, they left a roadmap.
Yeah.
We can use it to discover it for ourselves.
So it's about embarking on that inner journey of self-discovery.
Exactly. It's a journey. And it's a journey worth taking.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of alchemy. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking that Philosopher's Stone within yourselves. You never know what you might find along the way. We'll see you next time.